Okay, good, thank you. Okay, so I Murphy's Law. I used to get offended by all the Irish references that were so negative, like Murphy's Law and Paddy Wagon and Mulligans and all of that. But I'm Irish, so I can say I had Murphy's Law happen to me today. So of course I didn't get my paper printed, but I'll do the best that I can with my phone. So some of this stuff actually that I had come across in my research had to do with geometry, but I'm going to maybe only touch a little bit on that since she kind of covered most of that. But there's a friend of mine here that had recommended a book to me, and I was reading the book, and there were a couple of chapters that really just were so intriguing, and I couldn't help myself. It's like, I have got to start looking into this. So I would say this is more my musings on consciousness, because I just felt like I wanted to explore this a little more. So a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about has come from this book and some other things that I've been looking at, and some documentaries and whatnot. So you've heard of the saying, magic is just science we don't understand yet. It was, I think, the author of 2001 Space Odyssey. I think he's credited to that. Well, I was watching this TV show recently, and there was a scientist, and they were talking about spirituality, and she says, spirituality is just science we don't understand yet. Or is it? So I wanted to look more into consciousness and how science is explaining that, right? So in science, it tells us that the brain has neurons that interact with each other. So for example, when you have pain, it's the transmission of these signals that go to the area, and you experience pain along these nerve fibers, right? And science can tell us what the brain and body is doing when it's experiencing pain, right? But science, and it does help us understand how things work, how they interact, but it doesn't tell us what the thing actually is. It can't really explain the experience or the feeling of that. So it can tell us that these neurons are firing and this is what it's doing, but it really, the experience of it that we feel, we experience in our conscious self, there is nothing to explain that really so far. Maybe. So we can see sometimes that the world gets really caught up in religious dogma. I mean, we're witnessing that right now. I also think it can get caught up in scientific dogma. So we've come to rely on this idea of the philosophy of materialism, where all that is reality is what we see as physical stuff, right? So the only reality is physical matter, is what materialism is about. And science, really runs around like with that a lot, especially like what I was just saying. Like, oh, I can tell you what your brain is doing when you're feeling pain. That's material, right? But it can't tell us what the experience actually is. So it's basically like, they're saying that consciousness is something that's a byproduct of what the brain is doing. It's a process that the brain is doing. Something about neurons interacting or whatever. And that's how that philosophy is explaining what consciousness is. That there's some interaction inside the brain that's projecting out this world to us that's coming from in here. But it's not really telling you what consciousness is. It's just telling you what the brain is doing. So maybe it's different than what we think. Now, math is the language of science, and it's great for understanding how things work. And in quantum mechanics, we understand that matter is made up of atoms, which has particles like electrons and protons and neutrons, and that protons and neutrons are made up of quarks, and they're held together with gluons. And math tells us that 3 quarks are bound together by gluons, and they make a proton. But it doesn't really actually tell us what a quark or a gluon actually is in itself, right? So if you think about if people were particles and the people that are in a relationship to each other, we look at them as particles, math would only allow us to talk about them in terms of what they do, like the neurons that are signaling pain, right? We could see that they're holding hands or that they're standing apart or how long they're in each other's company, but it doesn't acknowledge their identities, and it doesn't acknowledge their experiences of their love, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. It describes the relationship in a mechanical way, but it ignores the experiential part. So matter and math can't really explain consciousness. But what if consciousness is not a byproduct of our brain's functions, but it's just outside the brain? It's everywhere, in everything. If there are physical laws that can explain how physical things interact, maybe there's laws of consciousness that explains how consciousness interacts. We'll talk a little bit about perception of reality. So humans have trichromatic vision. We have 3 cones that allow us to see a variety of colors and tones in the world, right, in this visible spectrum. And dogs have dichromatic, so they only have 2 cones, so they see less variation than we do, right? So maybe their greens are more browns and that kind of thing. There's some birds and fish and insects that have tetrachromatic vision, or 4 cones, and they can see lots of different things that we can't even see, right? Stuff on we see the visible spectrum that our eyes can see, but they can see even more. And then there's even creatures that have pentachromatic vision, which is 5 cones. So I mean, imagine imagine the things that they can see. They would be able to see things that we can't even describe because we don't see it, and to us it doesn't even exist. Maybe they're even seeing vibrations. We're not really seeing vibrations, but maybe they can. So to us, all of those things don't exist because we don't see it with our own vision. I heard someone explaining one day, I work out on the eco tour boat, and one of the captains was talking about birds. And he's like, oh, you know, I just read recently that the scientists are finding out that birds that migrate, it's not like they're just, they just know this path, right? That the path is somehow innate in them, right? But that they actually have something in their eye that can see the magnetic lines in the planet, and that they follow those. And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome, because I mean, we know magnetism is there, but we can't see it, you know, technically. We can see the effects of it, but we can't see it in itself, right? Now, I don't even know if that is really true, but it does serve as a good example of, you know, just because we can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there, right? In Vedic philosophy, there's a term called Nada Brahma, which is sound is God, or the universe is vibration. There's a field of energy operating in the universe. Some call it Akasha, or the primordial Om, or Indra's net of jewels. This field of invisible, or dark energy as it's now called, in the universe can manifest in patterns like fractals that we see in nature, right? These patterns that she was talking about that we see in nature, things like the cosmic spiral. We know that that's, you know, we can see that in nature. Our own Milky Way is a spiral galaxy. We see it in stellar orbits. We see it in hurricanes spiral. It's like the whole torque of the universe is this spiral, and things are imitating that in nature. Spider webs, snail shells, all kinds of things, right? So what if our brain's processes are just making patterns that create our physical reality, and that consciousness is the energy or vibration of all things, the very universe itself? In the physical world, we have a phenomenon called quantum entanglement, where 2 particles that were once connected and then separated remain connected despite the amount of distance between them. Have you ever felt something was wrong with someone that you have like an emotional bond with, and later find out something did happen to them, and you're like, oh my God, I just knew it? Or maybe you're thinking about someone you hadn't thought about in years, and all of a sudden the phone rings and it's them, and you're like, how did you know I was just thinking about you? This is kind of like an emotional entanglement, right? It can exist despite the physical distance or length of time between us. I think of like our connections with each other as people in this universe, in the consciousness of the universe, kind of like a spider web. The spider web spirals out. It has thicker strands, it has thinner strands, it's further away and closer to the spider depending on where the spider is, right? And when a bug lands on it, that spider can feel the tug. Now it might feel it stronger in the thicker places and less strong in the thinner places, or when it's further away from it, it might feel a little less. But I kind of see that's how our connections are with each other. I don't think that we can only just feel connections to others that we have an emotional attachment to. I think we can still connect to others if we tap into that consciousness of the whole spider web, so to speak. So what if consciousness is not just a byproduct of some function inside the brain? What if consciousness is primary? What if it's the basis of reality and it's in everywhere, in everything, not just something our brain creates? Matter, or physical reality, is just a form of consciousness, part of the unified whole. So think of the ocean, right? You see a wave come out of the ocean. Now a wave is coming up, it's having this individual experience. It just rises up, it travels across, and it crashes on the shore, and that's the end of its life. And what does it do? It goes right back into the ocean. So it never really leaves. It's having an experience on its own. It looks like a separate thing, but it never really leaves. It just goes right back. So I kind of think about the wave is having, it's part of the whole, but it's having its own individual experience, right? So perhaps there's a unified consciousness that we're all part of, right? It's just there. We're all part of it, but we're just one individual having a different experience out of that whole, but we're still part of that whole. So each person appears to be separate on the physical level. Like you're not me, I'm not you, I can't see through your eyes, right? But that's what it appears to us because that's how we see our physical environment. That's our reality that we've created, right? So each person that appears to have a separate individual experience on the physical level, but we're really all part of the whole, and therefore we can connect with each other on that level of consciousness. So might this be how we connect to those who have passed? That there is no death, just dissolution back into the whole, like a wave returning to the ocean, and we can tap into that. Like the gravitational field, right? It's everywhere. It's in everything. Everything has its own gravitational pull. I mean, ours is probably not very big because, you know, we're on Earth and Earth is huge and it really pulls us down to the Earth. But everything does have its own field of gravity. Now, we can't see gravity, but we can see its effects, right? Maybe that's how it is in the field of consciousness. Maybe it's everywhere and everything. We see it, how it affects in things like synchronicities that she was talking about earlier. Those numbers, those patterns that show up, knowing that something is wrong when you're not in their presence, but you know something is wrong. Maybe you get a gut feeling or intuition about something and you find out later you were right about it. Well, science likes to prove things objectively, but consciousness is subjective because it's experienced. We know how pain works, but we can't explain what the experience of pain actually is. We can't say what it is. And we just can't quite figure out how to explain what consciousness actually is in scientific terms either. And maybe that's the point. Perhaps you go inward and connect with the universal source, the conscious whole. Physicists now say that the universe consists of only 4% of atomic matter, like 4% physical matter. That's it. 23% is dark matter and 73% is dark energy, or what was previously known as empty space. So it's like this invisible nervous system running through the whole universe, connecting all things. Perhaps this energy is what we might think of as consciousness. The universe has this energetic vibration, and we can tap into that. So are we having a crisis of consciousness? How do we expand our fields of consciousness to connect with others through space and time and other dimensions that we can't even see with our eyes? How do we awaken and become more conscious, more enlightened, raise our vibration level, raise the universe's vibration? I'll give you a hint. It's not through thinking. We do a lot of thinking, and that doesn't get us to a lot of good places sometimes. Consciousness is not thinking. Consciousness is the one behind the thoughts, that's witnessing the thoughts. We expand consciousness and awaken and become more enlightened through love, through kindness, through compassion, trying to connect. The universal vibration operates on love and expands consciousness. Division and hate shrinks it. So remember the spider web or the wave that belongs in the ocean? If we fail to see ourselves in others and that we are all part of a whole, having individual experiences, we will not expand. We can't seek enlightenment just for ourselves. We must help all beings to awaken. So you are the you in universe. All is one. And that's my thoughts on consciousness.